The UK government is under fire from free speech advocates after launching a new digital campaign to stop teenagers from sharing quote unquote extremist content online.
Take a look at this video posted on Instagram by the UK's Counterterrorism policing account.
I just got all my devices taken away by the police. My mum couldn't believe it. I might get a criminal record and not be able to go to college. I only shared a link. I just thought it was funny. But it was terrorist content.
The caption to the video says, quote, "The content is being promoted on platforms young people already use to reach them where they are. Our message is simple. Sharing extremist material can lead to serious legal and life-changing consequences. That's not just a laugh. What you share leaves a trace." The campaign does not go into specific detail on what kind of posts would be classified as, quote, extremist content. But in 2024, the government changed its definition of extremism, defining it as the promotion of, quote, an ideology based on violence, hatred, or intolerance that aims to negate or destroy the fundamental rights and freedoms of others.
The video quickly spread online Thursday, with many expressing concerns about censorship. Ari Cohn, an attorney who specializes in free speech cases, writes, "Obviously, if terrorism was really the target, this commercial would be unnecessary. What this really demonstrates is that the UK is trying to make citizens afraid to speak online." And journalist Taylor Loren says the exact same thing is happening here. They're ramming these laws through the House and Senate.
So Robbie and I always really disagree on this. I'm first of all, what the UK does, they don't have, the same freedom of speech laws that we have. So to me, they can move however they think is appropriate for the UK. I, as a parent, think that there is some value. I could talk about the goodness to some of this. I think that when you talk about extremist groups and what happens in video games and on social media and some apps for young kids is that they are abreast to a bunch of content that even is beyond maybe what they were trying to consume. I think that even on YouTube Kids, there are advertisements that sneak in there that are not really appropriate. And Robbie's argument is always like parents should be parenting better. And there's a counter argument to that sometimes, your parent's not going to be with your kid when they're on social media, whether it's in different locations with friends at school, or if they're just working and your kid actually has access to a digital device and you're not actually parenting them in those exact moments, which, like you said, we both come from humble upbringings. Your parents are not with you every single second. So I think, open conversations between parents and seeing this type of scare tactics, something that probably was brought up, like, do you know where your kids are? Remember those commercials when we were younger? Like, I used to really be scared to come home after the street lights went on. Like, I don't want to be on one of those commercials. Was it dramatic? Most people knew where their kids are. It's probably way worse now than it was when we were kids. It's still something that people did. And so my mom was like, don't be one of those kids. Like, and I was scared into behaving what was appropriate so that I didn't end up in trouble. It was a tactic to protect me. Now, I think that we might be over-criminalizing young children to see that kid up there talking about, oh, I might be going to jail in the future, can't go to college. I don't know that I agree with that. But I do think that looking into what kids have access to and policing social media a little bit better so that especially young people aren't exposed to so much is a good thing.
Yeah, so I guess I'm generally in favor of making sure young children don't have access to social media or certain content, and that should be a partnership, I think, between parents and lawmakers and a conversation that happens. But what's happening in the UK is not about protecting children, it's about protecting the politicians. They have expanded their definition of extremist content to the point where people are getting arrested and in some cases actually put in jail for not sharing terrorist content as we would understand it, but through criticizing migration policies related to the influx of refugees into the UK. And if you are putting out videos of, I don't know how young that boy is, maybe somewhere in the 13 to 15 range, crying because he thinks the government's going to destroy his life because he shared a link that he thought was funny, that's actually really scary and Orwellian that the government thinks that that's an appropriate thing, that we need to, this isn't about protecting kids from the content, it's about scaring the kids to not share content that they disagree with.
Well, I know they expanded the definition, but some of that is about completely we shouldn't want online content, whether it exists or not. We live in a free speech society in the US, but we shouldn't want racism, bigotry, anti-Semitism, all this stuff just running rampant on social media. I know that it does, but that's not an ideal space for young
Well,
minds.
isn't that
to
up
have
for
it.
the tech companies though to decide what their content policies are and what their content moderation
And I think
standards
the
should
UK has
be?
been very critical of tech companies to do more, and the US is less critical.
Yeah, and so but instead of asking them and working with them, they've threatened to throw Elon Musk in jail, and then they're throwing the users in jail. Like I think you and I can both agree, and maybe I'm wrong on this. Obviously, racism is bad, but should we really be throwing people in jail for saying something racist? Like to me, that's really scary.
I don't think people should be in jail for saying something racist. I think that we shouldn't promote that, though. I think that we should definitely not want a society where kids are affected by the failures of the generation before them that doesn't know how to deal in
Yeah, we shouldn't want
communication,
it, but
right?
what's happening in the UK is that they're actually putting people in jail.
And that's a total difference. But I
Right.
think that if they are using this wholly, like I'd like to see the numbers of people that actually been arrested and what exact content. But if they're using this as a scare tactic for young kids to make them not share things that maybe are completely offensive to an entire community and leads them to possibly being better civilians, is that a terrible thing if they're not actually
Well, this
jailing
is the
these
kind of
kids?
thing that radicalizes people, honestly. Like young people, when they're told not to do something, that something is taboo, a lot of them want to seek it out even more because they're rebellious by nature. And so these scare tactics actually can have the opposite of the intended effect. And one of the reasons why we value free speech so highly is that we believe that in this country, this is what the founding fathers envisioned with the First Amendment, not only to be able to speak out against your government, but also the fundamental principle that if you have a bad idea, the best way to defeat it is not by suppressing it, but by countering it with a better idea.
Agreed. But the US and the UK are two different countries. And so I constantly see that we have so many issues with what the UK is doing and how they deal with social media and how they deal with people that live over there. And I think I'd like to hear more people that are actually from the UK in the conversation because we feel so riled
They
up
are
about
though.
it. I feel like
They're
even more than
protesting. I mean, like Tommy Robinson is a good example. There are a lot of UK activists who have been raising red flags about this and actually coming to the United States and asking for help to stop this censorship campaign. And look, British people complain about America all the time. They always have something to say. So I'm like, I've reserved the right to criticize them.
No, but I mean, even British friends that I have, like you said, they always are like, well, you know, we maybe have a little more strict rules than you, but we also, it's not as chaotic. That's their perspective. And so if it's just
Chaotic
like if the people,
when you're getting raped by a migrant grooming gang, but you know.
if the people over there are less adamant about what their government is doing, I just feel like should we be even more like Tommy Lauren, even more enraged than the people that is it really coming over
well,
here?
the
Because the
concern,
threat is that
though-
we're taking their ideas and we're going to become the UK. We are not. We have the First Amendment.
Well, the concern is that they can't properly advocate for themselves when their government is actively suppressing their speech. So the people who are speaking out face the risk of actually going to jail or being punished by their government. And so they actually do need assistance because they can't always be the ones saying what they want to say.
But I think we're overgeneralizing and comparing the UK to like Iran, comparing the UK to China, and everybody who's making that argument understands that it's totally different, right? The UK is trying to take precautions. In this case, they're arguing to protect kids from being in these extremist groups that end up in chat rooms and on gaming apps and in some of these games where people infiltrate.
Yeah, but
I think it's not the same thing as what we're seeing as a complete repression in some of these other countries.
In practice, the content that they are cracking down on is completely benign political ideology. So, I mean, for example, there was a comedian who traveled to London for, I believe it was for a show, and he had made a joke online about a recent incident where someone had been sexually assaulted by a migrant refugee in the UK. And when he got to the Heathrow airport, he was immediately detained by UK police because of a joke that he put on his social media account. So they are publicly making the argument that they're only cracking down on terrorist content, but in practice, that's not how it's being carried out. And that's why people are concerned.
I know the U.S. can't police the whole world, though. People in the U.S., including our president, does business in Saudi Arabia and countries all over the globe that have totally different policies in the way we live life. And our job cannot always be to police every single government
I'm with
around
you.
the
Look,
world.
I agree that we should not necessarily be focused on trying to fix the world's problems, but this is one of our oldest allies, and they are coming after our business owners, our big tech business owners, and actually threatening to fine and lock them up, which impacts the experience for our social media users as well. And so they have brought this to America, whether they like it or not.
Well, we're going to keep talking about
We
this.
will. All right, we have a lot more to talk about on Rising. Stay with us.